Hi again then guys, and welcome to another Special Projects Replica build, and this time we've got a requested build, which was actually requested a while ago and I completely forgot about it. And this particular replica is another Corvette C7 based replica. We've done a couple of these now. We did the C7 Z06 and of course the C7R, or about as close as we could get to those vehicles. Now though, we are replicating the latest high performance incarnation of the C7 generation Corvette, and that is of course the Grand Sport. And the Grand Sport, for those who are perhaps less familiar with it, is the more track focused variant of the Corvette range. You've got the standard Corvette, and then the Stingray, which is the more technically well-equipped version. Then you've got the Z06, which is the more just purely faster model overall, kind of takes the vehicle to a whole new level in every way. And then you've got the Grand Sport. The Grand Sport isn't as extreme as the Z06, but at the same time it makes it a more usable track package with less power to deal with, but also usually slightly less weight, and overall just more of a focus on all-round ability rather than just making it quicker in a straight line. Now, we don't have all of the information from what I could find about this car. We've got the power, we've got the weight, all that kind of stuff, but I wasn't able to find the gears for the Grand Sport. Not currently anyway, and it's because the car is still so new. So, what I've opted to do is to leave the gearbox stock, but we'll get more into that in a second, of course. Now, as far as the visuals, as you can see, I've opted to leave a couple of things on the car stock. The most obvious thing is, of course, the rims, because the rims actually look very similar to the wheels used on the Grand Sport anyway. Now, you can change them if you want to, but I just think that these look more authentic anyway. And also for the colour, those perhaps with a more trained eye will notice that this is the same blue that you can get the car with straight out of the factory, because again, it just felt more authentic to me to an actual blue that would be on the Grand Sport. Now, of course, the Grand Sport is going to be available in different colours, so feel free to change it at will. I just like it in blue. So the only real visual change I've actually made is to fit the carbon fibre body kit, because of course it has the same visual style as the Z06 with that wider overall body. So there's no real need to go over to the visual tuning garage for that single change that we made, so we'll go straight over to the mechanical tuning garage and then of course out to the track to see just what this car is capable of. Now, as always, of course, I do like to make these builds rounded off, if at all possible, PP-wise, and thankfully this one's actually really easy to round off to its nearest PP, 530, which is a pretty useful PP to have a car like this at anyway. I've got it running on sport softs, because of course it is a street-based build. As with most of my production replicas, I've left the brakes stock, because I didn't want it to feel too good. You could, of course, change that, though, if you feel the need. As far as suspension, we've got the ride height on 110, front and rear. Springs have increased to 875 and 925. The dampers to 4. Anti-roll I've left on 3, with neutral camber and tow. As I mentioned, I've opted to leave the gearbox stock. You could, of course, go for different gears if you want to. I just played it safe and went with that. As far as the clutch, flywheel and prop shaft, just like with the brakes, again, we've left those stock. As far as the diff, as usual, I would recommend changing this to suit your own preference, but I've gone for the highest initial torque, lowest acceleration, and braking sensitivity. As far as power, I have fitted an oil change on this one, because then this tune can still work for people who have already done an oil change, and then you don't need to buy a new car. So you don't need to fit any of the power upgrades, just reduce the power to 460 horsepower. Then as far as weight, you want the stage 1 weight reduction, and then add 110 kilos of ballast to bring us up to the actual weight of the real Grand Sport, which is 1,475 kilos. Now, I've opted to move the ballast forward a little bit, but you don't need to do that at all if you don't want to. And overall, that rounds us off to, as you can see, 530 pp, and it's a relatively simple replica actually overall. So now let's of course take it out to a racetrack to see what kind of a difference to the Stingray this replica makes. Now overall, this car of course doesn't have the sheer power of the Z06 replica, but the handling does feel, at least in my opinion, very well suited to track use. It's the kind of vehicle where stamping on the throttle, stamping on the brakes really is what the car likes to do. It's a car that likes to be driven hard. You don't really need to be that finessed with it. There's nothing to really worry about as far as wheel spin or oversteer. You can be very rough with the car and it will just take that and use it and be fast with it. So if you do decide to use this replica, obviously I hope you find it fun and potentially even competitive in racing. It can certainly win races. And if you'd like to keep up with other replicas, of course, like this one, or request others, be sure to do that down below. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.